Today on the program, we will be looking at the growing threat of armed banditry in northwest Nigeria, where criminal gangs, which started out as ethnic militias of vigilante groups, have proliferated in the region. The gangs are gaining in strength, adding recruits, arming themselves more heavily, and carrying out far more audacious attacks on both civilian and military targets. Just last week, gunmen killed at least 200 people in Zamfara State on Tuesday in an apparent retaliation against military airstrikes on the armed group's hideouts. We have more details for you in this report.
In 2021, at least 964 security agents lost their lives in Nigeria. Add that to the average of 32 civilian deaths recorded every day for most parts of the past year, and you have what security experts call a full-blown security crisis. More than 1,000 students were abducted in 2021 alone. In Nigeria today, families are mourning their children, family members, and loved ones lost to insecurity. Northern Nigeria has been described as a war zone. Many communities have been razed down and now deserted. Many deaths still go unrecorded, while terrorists continue to hold villages they have taken. Trillions of naira have been spent to address Nigeria's security lapses, but the results are barely visible. While there are terrorists and bandits to deal with, there are still religious and ethnic clashes happening in parts of the country. How can Nigeria grapple with the multi-layered security issues it faces? Africa's most populous nation has a long road ahead, but it can be the road to safety and security if the right steps are taken.
So what strategies can be developed to contain the armed groups and ease the humanitarian crisis, and how can the government stop these daredevil criminals? To answer these questions and secure the continent, I have joining me Colonel Francis Eromosole Okosun, retired security analyst, and Commodore Abimbola Ayuba, retired, who is a security risk consultant. Gentlemen, welcome to Secure the Continent.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Nice to have you both on the program. I would like to start with Commodore Ayuba. Just last Tuesday, 200 people were killed in Zamfara State, and we've seen this happen so many times and again. Will you say this attack that was carried out in Zamfara was done as a result of the airstrikes that has been happening in their bases in the forest?
Well, thank you very much, Gbenga. It's a continuing narrative into the level of decadence in which our humanity as a people have descended into. Everyday lives are being lost, and it's looking as if, because of the building resilience, it doesn't matter anymore if we lose 1,000 or 2,000. Yeah, and answering your question directly, you will understand that having maintained continuous pressure by air raids over some of these forests dominated by these terrorists, they feel that it is better for them to go after the local populace, further terrorize them, and on the suspicion that they are the ones probably giving away their location. And this is very, very uncalled for, and it will appear that the call for the opportune time for the establishment of community police as well as state policing becomes even more necessary, Gbenga.
Thank you very much, Commodore Ayuba. Just to stay with you, who are these bandits, and do they have a central chain of command? Are these groups linked to Boko Haram in any way? Because we do know that the war started against insurgency in the northeast. The northeast is experiencing some sort of calm now, and the center of attention has moved to the northwest. Or are they just armed groups just doing their thing?
Well, we continuously see evidence of a fusion between the uncontrolled armed groups that we had, and we gladly refer to as bandits, and which has given them a lot of cover because of the nature of the crime which banditry constitutes. And now that everybody has seen the need to see these people as terrorists, we know that they are beginning to fuse with the major terror groups like Boko Haram, ISWAP, and also from those who are fleeing from major military operations in the Sahelian belt, from Mali, from Niger, Burkina Faso, and that even brings us the geopolitical position of Zamfara, gives direct access to these already infiltrated and criminal-infested groups within the Sahelian belt. So that is where most of them coming from. And of course, a lot of recruitments are coming in, made easy by the lack of coordination within the states, within that general belt, and sometimes the lack of political will to deal with the subject matter, which is all about unemployment, poor education, poverty, and other associated problems, which we failed to deal with in the past, and is beginning to beckon. The impact is now beginning to be felt, because most of these young boys are within the ages of 10 to sometimes to 15, 16, with a determination to be so cold-blooded and wreak havoc without even thinking about it. There's a lot that needs to be done here, Gbenga.
Okay, thank you very much. Commodore, now to you, Colonel Okosu. The government's militarized response has, in some cases, further exacerbated the bandit crisis since the launch of Operation Harbin Kanama, which translates to Scorpion Sting in 2016. The Nigerian military has intermittently conducted anti-banditry campaigns in the northwest. These have often produced brief periods of calm as bandits are forced to relocate and regroup. Like we saw last Tuesday, you bombed them in their forest location, they move into civilian populations and they take a revenge on them. Isn't it time for a change of strategy, Colonel Okosu?
Thank you. Let me tell you something. There is no textbook approach to dealing with these situations. The theater or tactical commander would adopt an approach or method that he sees fit. Now, if you think there's the need for the design of a new approach to deal with the situation, then that will be informed by a proper appraisal of the threats, the factors, before you come up with one or with such. Now, bear in mind that you are up against an opposition that is not conventional, to say the least. Bear in mind that you are dealing with a crisis that you were, in a manner of speaking, not prepared for. You were not postured to deal with such. However, you must understand that the enemy you're up against is determined. He would respond in kind to every move that you make. And so we have seen what you have called a reprisal attack. Oh, the enemy would attack will come the way it has done, or he has done, because he needs to make a point. He has done that because he wants to attraction, distract you from your focus and from your aim, And then you can have these sort of things. Listen, we have had operations across the world, all over the world, dealing with insurgency, and we have had insurgents come against forces. And might I also add that the insurgent is one step ahead of you. So things like this are not uncommon and are not to be unexpected.
Thank you very much, Colonel Okosu. I would like to come back to Commodore Abimbola here. The violence is exacerbating the humanitarian crisis in the northwest, in the entire northern region of Nigeria, which already has some of the highest levels of displacement, poverty, malnutrition, and disease. What are some of the implications of these ongoing violence on the economy and education in the region?
First of all, development to a very large extent has been stalled. Apart from very pragmatic leadership provided by the governor of Borno State, who has insisted on continuing within all the odds to grow and develop his state. Otherwise, life has really come to a standstill in most of these northern communities. And honestly speaking, the scale is unimaginable because food production, for instance, have ceased. There are major cattle markets that have ceased to exist, and many communities that used to be seen on Google Map have vanished due to destruction of most of these communities. So the implication also on our demography, on our culture, religious belief of our people is quite immense. But most importantly, most of the areas being infiltrated and abused and dominated by these terrorists are elsewhere food production belts of the country. So we actually need to expect that food shortages will creep in, particularly around Zamfara, Yobe, and most of the states, including Borno, where most people cannot actually farm beyond 1 kilometer from the local government headquarters, including Maiduguri. So it's a very, very dangerous situation. The most school children are out of school, and of course, many of them are being gradually recruited into joining these bandits, terrorist groups. And we do not know. And also, sadly, we are beginning to look at future causes, sources of conflict, which is part of those who have lost their ones, the children who have lost their parents, who are now orphaned, who are now beginning to hate the system and are joining these terror groups a way of retaliating and causing more mayhem in the society. So the impact will be great, and the humanitarian disasters will continue to escalate if we do not deal decisively with these terror groups.
Staying with you, Commodore Ayuba, the government recently designated what we erstwhile used to call bandits, terrorists, and you rightly call them terrorists in your submission just now. Does that change the rule of engagement, and will it move the needle a bit in this fight against insurgency in the northwestern part of the country?
Certainly.
Yes.
Certainly, Gbenga, because a lot of clamor have been on hitherto to make the government to pronounce these bandit groups as terror groups, because all their actions and intent are synonymous with terrorism, which is to kill, intimidate, cause fear and panic among defenseless citizens. So now that the government has redesignated them as terrorists, the war against terrorism will become more robust in terms of the rules of engagement, the equipment that will be deployed against these groups. And don't forget that in the international law, it's a bit more lenient with military operations against terrorism than terrorists, than when you call them by other names. Take the Super Tucanos, for instance, and the contract the Nigerian government had made with the Americans not to use them against civilian and defenseless populace. Now, with this terror thing, administration coming in, the Super Tucanos will be easily deployed to do that without much going to Geneva to answer war crimes. And the issue of collateral damages and all that will be torn down. And I believe that we should be on to the path to finally degrading or eliminating these criminal and terror groups once and for all from our landscape.
Thank you very much, Commodore Ayuba. I would like to bring in Colonel Okosun here. There's a buzzword we often throw around when discussing security issues in Nigeria, and I'm talking about intelligence gathering. They say the approach to fight terror should be intelligence-driven, but communities bear the brunt of providing intelligence to some of this military outfits, like these Zamfara communities where 200 people were killed for providing details of the location of bandits. What's the level of culpability of the military in Nigeria's current predicament? What can they do to protect informants and ensure that there's a level of protection for vulnerable civilian populace?
If I get you right, you're asking how the protection of sources of information, protection of sources of intelligence, is that what you're asking?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Evidently, the first rule is that your sources must be protected. Now let's go beyond that. I always emphasize that, yes, the theater commander or the tactical commander would desire intelligence. But you see, the background to intelligence has to come from organized and established organizations. Look, there is little that the tactical commander in Zamfara can do without the input of the established security agencies, the Department of State Service, the police, and such like, the traditional rulers, the locals. Now, how have all these come together to garner these resources? How have they been able to come together to help in getting the raw material to the tactical commanders? Now, I am not aware that any tactical commander will give away their sources of information. They have always had information from the grassroots. These have been processed and used as intelligence. And to my knowledge, I think most of these have been protected. However, when there is a swift and decisive action in a particular sector, chances are that the people so decimated will probably look for scapegoats in those areas. In that of fighting a war is part of this problem.
Okay, still staying on the subject, just last week we saw the governor of Zamfara State, Governor Bello Matawalle, visited injured members of the populace. He commensurated with them. But looking at Nigeria's constitution, the governor cannot issue orders to tactical commanders. He doesn't even control the commissioner of police in the state. The commissioner of police has to respond take instruction from the IG, who is at the force headquarters in Abuja. Is it time to declare a state of emergency and put in military administrators there until we get some positive results from this? Because is one death too many? Are the civilian... Because the governors seem absolutely helpless in this situation.
Now, declaring a state of emergency and appointing a military administrator does not confer authority to issue instructions to a federal police on the military administrator. He would be a military administrator for a territory so designated as state A. The governor of a state is unable to issue instructions, quote unquote, issue instructions to the federal police. To that extent, will the military administrator be unable to? The appointment of, the declaration of a state of emergency and appointment of a military administrator means that you can fast track certain things. You don't have the, what is the word now? You don't have the impediment which the state assembly, the legislative arm and so on will bring on you. You can now take decisions based on the need. You don't have to go to the state assembly to ask for powers to do certain things. That is what state of emergency implies. It doesn't make a sole administrator or a military administrator superhuman. It doesn't confer any extra powers, as it were, beyond the family. He still operates within the Constitution only to the extent that he does his things without necessarily having recourse to the state assembly.
Okay, thank you very much, Colonel Okosu. It's a fine place to go on a break right now, and when we come back, we have more for you. Stay with us here on Secure the Continent. Welcome back to Secure the Continent. I'm still here with Colonel Francis Eramosole Okosun and Commodore Abimbola Ayuba. We're looking at the other insurgency, the rise of banditry in the northwest region of Nigeria. Welcome back, gentlemen. I'd like to start with Commodore Ayuba. We've seen this, the military has bombed, they've acquired weapons, we've spent billions of dollars on fighting insecurity and insurgency in Nigeria, but it seems to be, it depends on who you ask. We don't even know if we're making headway. Do you think we can shoot our way out of this insurgency, or there should be other approaches to winning this war against terrorism?
Well, the war against terrorism has never been decisively won by military means. All over the world and the landscape of terrorism have always been resolved partly by negotiation, partly by military interventions, but mainly by empowering the local populace and encouraging them to defend their own spaces, and by equipping them and motivating them, while also building dependable alliances with countries who have similar experiences and who can actually bring their advisory to bear. So no matter how much payload of bombs and ammo we drop, it will, to some extent, maybe reduce or dislocate. But don't forget that we are dealing with an ideological war. Sometimes which has now developed into criminal tendencies and territorial attempts to seize part of our territory. So somehow we have to be more pragmatic and more robust in making sure that those who are locals among them are fished out, and we deal decisively with them, because part of what has happened so far has been the domain of impunity, where most of these people are found, they are arrested so many times, and they get released. So when the justice system, the wheel of justice, yes, we know, grinds sometimes slowly, but we must expedite the dealing of the justice system on these criminal groups. Once you set the pace and people are seen to be punished for whatever action they've done, like the US had no option but to create Guantanamo despite all its criticisms. We have to be take off the kid gloves and deal decisively with this. Otherwise, every day these guys become more sophisticated. From all the monies they take from kidnappings, robberies, and killings, and we don't know who is sponsoring them. Even when we know, we are not doing anything about the sponsors. And these are issues that need to be addressed. It's a combination of actions that we need to take, local, international, and of course, using the regional mechanisms as it were.
Thank you very much. Commodore Ayuba, I would like to come back to you, Colonel Okosu. Same question, is this war winnable? I mean, we've seen the American adventure in Afghanistan 20 years, after 20 years of fighting there with billions of dollars spent, and they have one of the most sophisticated military equipment in the world. The Taliban is still back in government in Kabul. So is this asymmetrical type of war against ideology and bandits winnable militarily, or do we need to engage other approaches?
The aim of any military operation is to rain so much power, so much force on the enemy, winch him out of his foxhole and get him to sign a peace treaty. That is one way. Another way is that you fight to the extent that parties determine that they come to a peace table to reach an agreement. You can also, look, Tupac Amaru in Latin America, the problem there was resolved on the table. The Basque separatist movement in
Spain.
Spain, it was not one. Yeah, it wasn't one. We have to keep fighting to the extent that the enemy finds it unattractive to continue with their line of action, to the extent that they'll be willing and able to come to an agreement. Like the Commodore just said, you are unlikely to win these campaigns through firefights. But before we get to that point, we must make sure that there's this assertiveness that will make you be in a position of strength to be able to negotiate.
Now, Colonel, we are fighting an unconventional warfare here. You have a group of bandits with no central command, and it's almost like the Wild Wild West. A lot of them in different groups are fighting for, supremacy, hitting soft civilian targets. Are these the kind of people you can't negotiate with? We saw what happened in the Niger Delta with the amnesty program and its results. But in this situation, how do you bring negotiation to the table? Is it an option?
Okay. I am not holding brief for the federal government, but you heard the federal government a while ago say that there are sponsors. Now the question is, if there are sponsors, have we gotten in touch with these sponsors? If we have sponsors, what have we done with or about these sponsors? Certainly something can be done. You see, nothing is amorphous. These people are not amorphous. There is some form of command and control, some form of cooperation, coordination, and liaison between these seemingly, how do you say it now? These pieces
right
all over the places. Yeah, this ragtag, yes, you can, there is a way. Look, if you say there are sponsors, what have you done about these sponsors? That is where to start from.
Okay, thank you, Colonel Okosu. I would like to go back to Commodore Ayuba here. So a lot of, we've seen military power reign on these people. They've lost quite a number of foot soldiers, but it seems there's a conveyor belt that keeps producing this insurgent. So what is fueling this insurgency, and where are they getting their foot soldiers from? And how can we squeeze the nozzle on that so we don't have them coming back into the pipeline?
The root causes of terrorism. And I will tell you that there are 4 cluster causes of terrorism. And structural causes, there are accelerator causes, there are trigger causes, and lastly, motivational causes. When you, first of all, let me even take an example from the structural causes. When we have been talking about states being given more autonomy, local governments being given more powers to work for the people. And over these years, it's been a big problem. Not until recently, when the federal government insisting that local government funds should go back to the local governments. We had created local governments. The funding for it had been withheld by the state governors. And naturally, the people abandoned the spaces within the local governments and go after the money in the capital and began to leave spaces ungoverned, spaces became void, and those places that we hated so much, I think is dry, became more attractive to those who are coming from across our borders. And you know, we also have a typical problem with our border or boundary communities. And this is the issue of cross-cultural affinities of boundary communities, where because of the nature of partitioning and delineation of boundaries, you can easily cross the border to the other end and stay with your cousins, and international law may protect you. Going away from that, we have seen that the advent of technology, of course, is providing information for these people. And of course, going to motivational causes, the kind of perquisites now that these terror groups are getting out of the country is making them to see it as big business. And that opens another plethora of problems, which we refer to in quote as the Boko Haram economy, which tries to explain the kind of funding that are coming in both from humanitarian sources, merchants of debt, groups who sell munitions to these criminals, and all. So that economy is getting bigger and bigger every day, and nobody wants the war to end. The kind of rents that are being paid, for instance, by most international NGOs in dollars, and they are paying over 5 years rent. So it means that those who are making this money also
don't want it to end.
They won't pray for it to end. So we have to start by attacking the economy of this terrorism, and by killing that and demotivating people. Go around the boundaries, you see big stores selling all sorts of things, and it's difficult.
I think
going to some which we need to remove the root causes, and when we do that, we will be able to manage the rest.
Thank you very much, Commodore Ayuba. Colonel Okosu, no country is an island. We've seen countries ask for help. In Mali, as we speak, the French have military bases there. There's currently an Operation Berkane happening there. In Mozambique's Cabo Delgado province, the Southern African Development Community, SADC, and Rwanda's government has sent troops there to help quell the insurgency in the Cabo Delgado province, and we've seen the results there. I know Nigeria is the giant of Africa. We've seen what we've done with ECOMOG intervention forces in Sierra Leone and Liberia, and we might not want to go that way. But thousands of Nigerians have died, millions have died in this insurgency. Is it time for us to ask for our international partners for help in tackling this insecurity?
We certainly have international partners. We have a multinational joint task force. We have cooperation with Niger and Benin Republic on the northwest. These are cooperations. These are coordinations. These are liaisons that we have with these people. We are unlikely to ask them to come in, as it were, to come and fight this with us. But along the borderline, because this is an issue of people crossing our porous borders into our lands. We have an agreement with Niger, for example, and this is enforced, then it will reduce further the influx of unwanted people into our country. Until we are able to do that, we will probably have unchecked movement or influx of people into the country. I don't think that Nigeria is going to get to a point where it's going to ask, what country are you going to ask to come and fight for you? Just think about it. Everybody has a plate full. So.
Okay. Thank you very much, Colonel Okosu. I would like to throw the same question to Commodore Ayuba. What sort of help do we need? The Colonel just said we do have some existing international partnership with our neighboring countries. What else can the international community do? They've sold us Super Tucanos that we've been asking for all these days, the United States of America.
Well, like Colonel Okosu had mentioned, it is true that we have cooperation from our neighbors, Niger, Chad, but there are also issues concerning funding those groups. You know, funding in the sense that most of these countries, are not as rich, in quote, as Nigeria, and oftentimes they at some time cannot really sustain themselves for that long in these ventures. And of course, the growing problem of terrorism within the Sahelian belt is also putting demand on these countries to pull back troops to protect themselves also in their other frontiers. Going to the international environment, I think the regional, sub-regional, the ECOWAS has, to my mind, failed Nigeria in many ways. And the way Nigeria has stood up for the ECOWAS over Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, in fact, in other parts, if they had reason to support us the way brothers in solidarity should, we would have been able to liberate some of our forces and away from some of these sectors where these problems are. And on a more serious note, the United Nations eventually may need to come in, but that is a long and winding process. And of course, it means that Nigeria needs to begin to look for more trusted, willing partners that will help us out through these difficult times. And looking at the attrition rate, the military has paid so much toll for this survival of this nation in almost all the states in Nigeria, the military is engaged. The armed forces is engaged. And that brings us to this idea of what happens to soldiers that have been lost in battle, their families, and the wounded.
Commodore, I'm so happy you mentioned that, because you just preempted my next question, which is, we often focus on the hardware and we do not understand or, try to imagine ourselves and see the sacrifice of this personnel that have put their lives. Some have lost their lives in battle to keep us together as one country. Saturday, the 15th of January, is going to be celebrated as Armed Forces Remembrance Day. It will afford Nigerians the opportunity to reflect on the sacrifices made by departed heroes in the current war against insurgency. What can be done to improve the morale of servicemen and even retired servicemen to better encourage them so we're more appreciative of their sacrifice?
First of all, Gbenga, let me say this, and it's true that in the history of the armed forces, the military had not had this good up until the this Buhari administration.
Even under military regimes,
things have been done. Yes, this regime, this particular administration has done so much for the military, and also in terms of the pensions, except for some divisive policies that have been put in place by some mischievous elements in the system, where they separated some benefits from some category of veterans, which is causing the unrest. For example, the 24 months arrears that military pensioners went into the streets to complain about, and also the security department allowance, which was denied to people from 2017 down. And then otherwise, the issue of health insurance is there, and there are many soldiers that are wounded. We need to have veteran hospitals and facilities for veterans to manage purely the problems of post-traumatic stress disorder. Veterans cannot truly share the same hospital as those who are serving, because their needs are quite complex, and most of them are migrating into geriatric age, where they need to be better managed. These are absent, and these are things that we think that can be put in. Also, the society needs to be fair on the military pensioners. In other climes, the US, for instance, the military veterans are boarded first on any flights, and they are acknowledged even when they are known to be on board. And it's a thing of pride. You don't see that here. Rather, they probably get bullied or are not even even able to fly. So this is it. A lot needs to be done still to improve the lot of veterans.
Absolutely, judging by the sacrifice they've made for this country. We're fast running out of time, but before we go, I'd like to take Colonel Okosun's reaction on this. Armed Forces Remembrance Day is coming up. What is your message to those servicemen and the veterans, retired military personnel in Nigeria? And what can be done to motivate and boost the morale of those serving?
Yes, I acknowledge that the current dispensation has done so much for the veterans. But it remains to be stated that when you take the issues concerning veterans as what can come after all else must have been dealt with, you are creating a situation that would affect morale of not only the veterans, but the serving personnel. When a serving personnel realizes that his older colleagues, retired colleagues, have not been paid, listen, we're talking about the consequential adjustment arising from the last minimum wage approvals, which every other person has been paid. 24 months arrears is outstanding for over a year now, and you've not paid such, and you expect a man to face fire in Sambisa Forest or in the Northwest. For what? For what motivation? There's a security department allowance, as the general, the Commodore has just said. You have done nothing about it. You see, it makes 15th January celebration a hollow ritual. That is what I think it is. Until these are, look, there's a lot to be done. They can do a lot better.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. And I would like to say happy Armed Forces Remembrance Day to you in advance. Thank you very much for being such great company. I do appreciate your insights on the subject matter. Our guest has been Colonel Okosu and Navy Commodore Ayuba. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of the show. And that's how much we could take on today's Secure the Continent. Until next time, I'm Gbenga Aborowa.